EQ literally impacts every single decision that we make. Physiologically, decisions go through the emotion center of our brain before it ever reaches our logic or thinking or rationalizing part of our brains. So everybody, regardless of how aware, unaware, in tune, not in tune to your emotions you are, every decision goes to our emotion center of our brain. What is going on, EQ gangsters? So this episode is going to be based on a question that I got from a real good buddy of mine who's a former senior non-commissioned officer in the United States Army. He's retired Sergeant Major. He spent some time in Ranger Regiment. He in one of the Ranger battalions. He was also a Ranger instructor. He was also in the 82nd Airborne Division. And super great guy. I was able to meet him at Ranger School. In fact, one of the previous episodes not too long ago was actually about this guy, a guy named Dale Roberts. Incredible dude. You can find him on LinkedIn. He is going to business school, I believe, right now, and just doing an amazing job. And he posed a great question to me that I want to share with you all. This episode is sponsored by the EQ Mafia. If you all feel like you're ready to level up your emotional fitness program and or begin an emotional fitness program, the EQ Mafia would be a great place to start. It's a great, safe, supportive, encouraging, equipping community, all based around everything related to emotional health and emotional intelligence. Again, in a great community environment. There's folks with all kinds of different backgrounds. We've got executives, we've got military, we've got former military, we've got homeschool leaders, we've got entrepreneurs. Again, just about every demographic. It's international. We've got some wonderful folks from Australia, some great folks from Australia, some authors. Anyway, lots of neat people that are already part of the EQ Mafia. And so, again, we'd love to have you. To get more details on the EQ Mafia, just go to eqgangster.com. You'll be able to look at one of the tabs. It'll say, check out the Mafia or join the Mafia or something about the Mafia, and you can get more details about that. So, let me share with you the question. Now, for those of y'all that are watching on YouTube, you're going to be seeing me looking down at the question. And for those of y'all that are listening to the podcast, awesome. Doesn't matter where my eyes are. So, also, I want to thank you guys so much for rating, reviewing, subscribing, and sharing our podcast. Maybe there's a particular podcast episode that's resonated with you. Thank you so much. I've shared actually a LinkedIn post today and a Facebook post today about one of my big recent revelations and epiphanies from one of the lessons that I am sharing, that I shared today on my LinkedIn and Facebook, came from one of the lessons that I shared on episode 222 about 20 lessons on emotions that I've learned over the past few years. And so it's gotten a lot of engagement, a lot of responses and stuff, which is super neat. It's always neat and a blessing when I'm able to share a failure of mine, a weakness of mine, a shortcoming of mine that I have learned from and grown from that also resonates with other people. It's a tremendous blessing. So anyway, if you guys want to, go check that out. Again, my Facebook page or LinkedIn. Okay, so Dale asked me this question. I want to answer it on the podcast here. Noble, I'd like to know how we navigate the new trends in society and business that focuses so heavily on EQ. Everyone is talking about emotional intelligence and implementing emotional intelligence in the day-to-day interactions and operations. I think emotional intelligence is important. I'm finding so much attention is focusing on emotional intelligence, and nobody's talking about resilience. We seem to be drifting away from mental, physical, and emotional resilience, also referred to as intestinal fortitude. It seems we focus so much on people's feelings while ignoring people's resilience or toughness. How can we establish balance? Yes, we need to be cognitive of our own and others' emotional factors. We also need to foster an environment that also builds emotional resilience. As you and I both know, not for the weak or faint-hearted is more than a catchphrase. It is a life reality. Emotional intelligence is great during times of prosperity. However, resilience gets your teams through tough times. I am interested in your views. Thanks, brother. Rangers lead the way. We used to call physical training and road marches resilience training. That's easy in the military to implement. In society, not so much. Your team would look at you like you were nuts if you told them to come to work in running shoes and fitness clothes to start a resilience training program. So I also want to pull up another document or resource that kind of addresses this as well, and that is the Ranger Creed. Now, for those of you all that are civilians, Ranger School is one of the Army's leadership schools. You go through sleep deprivation and food deprivation and are put under a significant amount of stress and duress, and your decisions, your leadership decisions are evaluated. For more details on Ranger School, you can just YouTube or Google Army Ranger School, and you will be able to see that school. And I also affectionately call it my elite weight loss program. I lost, I think, 40 pounds in 2 months, maybe even close to 50 pounds. So I think the Ranger Creed is relevant in that it kind of hits on some excellent resilience topics. So recognize that I volunteered as a Ranger, fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession. I will always endeavor to uphold the prestige, honor, and high esprit de corps of the Rangers. Now, one other quick note here, because it's going to go down RANGER. This is something that we said multiple times under a tremendous amount of duress throughout Ranger School, especially during what's called 0 week, which is the week to weed out those that were not mentally, emotionally, or physically ready to go through actual Ranger School. 0 week was kind of like the first set of cuts. There was a road marches, there was lots of physical training, lots of running, combatives, all kinds of stuff, again, to kind of weed out folks. That was called 0 week, and again, you can YouTube and Google all this stuff. But this creed is, I mean, it's a life motto. It is a creed that, you know, those of us that went to Ranger School and earned our Ranger tab, you know, value tremendously. And then there's something called the Ranger Regiment, where there's a difference, and I'm not going to go into these details, but there's a difference between being an Army Ranger, like at Ranger Regiment, and then there's a difference between being Ranger qualified in a regular Army unit, which that was me. So I was Ranger qualified in the 82nd Airborne Division, but I was never in Ranger Regiment. Big difference. So anyway, but both organizations, right, the 82nd Airborne Division and Ranger Regiment, still, for those of us that were Ranger qualified, still very much espoused and embraced the Ranger Creed as a creed to live by. So I already read that first stanza of the Ranger Creed. The second stanza of the Ranger Creed, acknowledging the fact that a Ranger is a more elite soldier who arrives at the cutting edge of battle by land, sea, or air. I accept the fact that as a Ranger, my country expects me to move further, faster, and fight harder than any other soldier. Another note while I finish that second stanza. See if you can extrapolate the points of emotional intelligence that make up the Ranger Creed. What parts of the Ranger Creed are impacted or affected directly or indirectly by emotional intelligence. Never shall I fail my comrades. I will always keep myself mentally alert, physically strong, and morally straight, and I will shoulder more than my share of the task, whatever it may be, 100% and then some. Gallantly will I show the world that I am a specially selected and well-trained soldier. My courtesy to superior officers, neatness of dress, and care of equipment shall set the example for others to follow. Energetically will I meet the enemies of my country. I shall defeat them on the field of battle, for I am better trained and will fight with all my might. Surrender is not a Ranger word. I will never leave a fallen comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy, and under no circumstances will I ever embarrass my country. Readily will I display the intestinal fortitude required to fight on to the Ranger objective and complete the mission, though I be the lone survivor. Rangers lead the way. Okay, so again, phenomenal creed. Lots of stake, right, in terms of mindset and core values and beliefs that are expressed in that Ranger Creed. But again, I think it very much ties into Dale's question about resilience, right? That is the Ranger Creed. The Ranger Creed is essentially a creed about resilience in from hitting it from many different angles and aspects. So this is how I would answer that question. What is the relationship and or the balance between resilience and emotional intelligence? So I think, number one, I think many people have an intellectual, well, maybe not even an intellectual understanding of emotional intelligence. They've got a very surface level understanding of EQ. EQ literally impacts every single decision that we make. Physiologically, decisions go through the emotion center of our brain before it ever reaches our logic or thinking or rationalizing part of our brains. So everybody, regardless of how aware, unaware, in tune, not in tune to your emotions you are, every decision goes to our emotion center of our brain. And that goes for those of you like me that have made it a standard operating procedure or SOP to stuff and avoid your emotions. That's a nuance that I really want to bring up. There's a difference between being resilient and stuffing and avoiding your emotions. You may think that, well, man, I've got crazy resilience, but you have little to no EQ. You can have, and I've seen people that have tremendous resilience, mental, physical resilience, but are not emotionally intelligent. Again, so emotional intelligence is the ability to acknowledge, identify, process, and manage your own emotions and the emotions of those around you. So it's self-awareness and others' awareness. There's self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, social management. That's one of the industry standards models of EQ from way back in the days. Since then, now there are lots of different EQ models and stuff. The EQ assessment that I have access to, EQI 2.0 assessment, assesses 15 different areas of emotional intelligence. So again, the one I'm using for the sake of this particular conversation, I'm just, again, doing a higher level, not a super deep dive into this kind of juxtaposition between resilience and emotional intelligence. So again, I have seen a lot of people that have met a lot of people that have been through a tremendous amount of pain and trauma, stress, anxiety, etc., and are resilient but are not self-aware, are not great at self-management, and are also not socially aware and have little to no social management skills. So now, that being said, I also think that emotional health and emotional intelligence, getting emotionally healthier and growing your emotional intelligence, can absolutely impact and affect our resilience. And here's how. I've done a couple episodes about this. I don't know what they're called off the top of my head, but it's about, there's an episode that I've done, I want to say within the last 6 months, that talks about, as I've gotten healthier emotionally, my emotional bandwidth has increased, which really is kind of code for resilience. In fact, I just interviewed a young guy today, a senior in high school, who started working on growing his emotional intelligence as a result of his mom teaching him points about emotions and emotional health that she has been learning from her therapist as a result of trauma that she has been through in her lifetime, in her childhood and life and stuff. And so 4 years, this young guy who is now a senior in high school is now, I feel, very emotionally healthy. Now, part of his emotional health is not just due to the fact that he's been exposed to some of these tools that he's been applying as a result of his mom teaching him. It's also been due to the emotional health of his parents. It sounds like, and I've never met his parents before, his parents are both very emotionally healthy. They're both very emotionally stable, emotionally predictable, which creates a tremendous psychological, emotional, and mental environment, a great environment for children to grow up in, which impacts emotional health. And so one of the things that he said is, Noble, as a result of the emotional health of the house I have been raised in the past 18 years, and intentionally working on my EQ over the past 4 years as a result of my mom teaching me, he said, I have much greater emotional bandwidth for my friends that are going through tough times, or struggling on something, going little struggle bus hops. I've had friends reach out and say, hey man, do you mind if I talk to you about stuff I'm going through? Absolutely, bring it on. Why? Because he knows how to acknowledge, identify, process, and manage his own emotions. And so now he's safe with his own big, strong, intense emotions, pleasant and unpleasant, which makes him much more apt to handle the big, strong, intense, pleasant and unpleasant emotions of his friends and even family members. And so in that way, emotional health and emotional intelligence, in my opinion, directly impacts our our resilience. So having resilience does not guarantee you have emotional intelligence or emotional health, because again, it can mean that you've been great at stuffing and avoiding, which has been the story of my life for 98% of my life until the past 3 or 4 years ago. I was molested when I was 5, and again in college when I was a freshman or sophomore in college, and the whole time, right? So all those experiences, and then I was in a business cult for 20 some years. All of those experiences, the two trauma experiences, and then 2 decades of emotional control, emotional manipulation, toxic positivity, gaslighting, all the different things that were emotionally unhealthy about the environment that I was in for many, many years. You could argue that I had of course, and then I went to West Point, and did fairly decent at West Point. I was went to Ranger School, was in the 82nd Airborne Division as an infantry officer. So you could argue that I have done some things that required some resilience, but throughout all those experiences, I had very, very little emotional self-awareness, even less probably emotional self-management. I had more social awareness and social management, but that was due to unhealthy reasons, because I was, again, toxic positivity and a people pleaser addict. And so I was hyper aware of people around me, because I always sought out validation, affirmation, and approval from everyone else around me. That is only why my social awareness and social management were as high as they were when I was emotionally unhealthy and emotionally clueless. And the other point is that I want to make about this relationship between EQ and resilience is, understand that the goal of EQ and getting healthier emotionally and acknowledging, identifying, processing, and managing your emotions is not, the goal is not to become this warm, fuzzy, kumbaya, let's hold hands and bathe in essential oils, right? That's not the goal of being emotionally intelligent, of emotional intelligence. The goal is to be a more in tune, aware, effective, empathetic, connected human being, leader, entrepreneur, military leader, business leader, homeschool leader, veteran, healthier veteran. I feel like my resilience has gone up even more, even though again I say fairly resilient. My capacity, my bandwidth to handle and process my own big, strong, intense emotions, and therefore others' big, strong, intense emotions, has gone through the roof. So I know my resilience has increased as a result of me getting healthier emotionally and growing my emotional intelligence. But the converse is not necessarily the case, again, in my opinion. Just because you may be hardcore resilient, super ninja, physically, mentally resilient, does not necessarily mean that you are emotionally healthy or that you are emotionally intelligent. So anyway, that's just, again, my perspective, my 2 cents. I really think, again, for me, my EQ journey has absolutely directly impacted my resilience and stuff, because I know I could give you example after example. Just my comfort and effectiveness in conflict. It's night and day. I was a train wreck in dealing with conflict prior to my emotional growth and emotional health. Train wreck. Terrible in conflict. I hated conflict. As a people pleaser addict, I couldn't stand conflict. And I was terrible in conflict. Now, as a recovering people pleaser addict, probably 90%, 95% of the way healed from my people pleasing addiction. And now that I'm emotionally healthier and I have some emotional tools and emotional awareness, some emotional management skills, I'm very comfortable in conflict now. Very comfortable. I don't get elevated. I don't get amped. I don't go into the conflict already emotionally hijacked and triggered. And I've got a hairpin trigger on my temper, on my attitude, none of that. I'm way more effective now in conflict than I ever was before. That's proof of my growth. And again, the amount of the intense emotions that I'm able to handle with myself is proof of growth. And then also being able to share the same space with those around me that are going through some very, very tough, traumatic times. I'm very comfortable in those spaces now. If somebody wants to cry, cuss, scream, vent, jump, I'm very comfortable sharing that space with them without letting their emotional state adversely impacting my emotional state, which was completely unheard of before my emotional growth journey. Hope that helped. Hope that created some maybe some connections or insights for you, or maybe not. Maybe you think, man, I know, but I totally disagree with you. That is super fine too. I'd love to hear from you. Again, whether you're on watching this on YouTube or on our podcast, I'd love to hear from you. Or you want to send us an email, Noble, Noble at eqgangster.com. Emotionally healthy people help heal other people emotionally. Emotionally healthy leaders create emotionally healthy cultures and organizations, which lead to optimized and maximized outcomes and results.